Yo, what's going on, guys? The Kitty G on EGTV, and we're back again with another video. Today, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be reacting and giving you guys a little review of the first 3 episodes of All or Nothing Arsenal. I thought it was a great show so far, great, informative, very informative, giving us the backstage pass behind the scenes to tell you everything of what's going on behind the scenes with the club and the players and the management and Edu, the ownership and everything else. So before we get started, this is a spoiler warning. Do me a favor, if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it. Come back after you've watched it. But if you have watched it, this is going to be a little informative and give you guys the inside scoop of some things that you might have missed and some things that we've learned in the first 3 episodes of the All or Nothing documentary. I'll be doing this for every single time they drop, so I'm going to be doing 2 more reactions. But for now, let's get the show started. Bang. Yo, what's going on, guys? The Kitty G on EGTV, and we're back again with another video. Honestly, guys, I have been so excited and waiting for this All or Nothing documentary for so long. Honestly, I thought it was going to be absolutely terrible. I thought the season was going to be so bad, but you know what? It did end bad in the sense that we didn't get top 4, but there was also some high moments and some low moments, and it was a melodrama. The actual category that the show was categorized under was they took the absolute piss. They categorized it as comedy, sports. They categorized it as drama. They just gave it a bunch of categories. And honestly, so far, the first episode was very captivating. And let me just get into the first episode before we go any further. Do me a favor, guys. If you're watching on the playback or you're watching live, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you don't know my name's Igal, and this is EGTV. And you can also catch me on my Twitter on EGTV Igal and my TikTok and everything else. But let's get the admin out of the way. Now let's go straight into episode 1. Episode 1 was called The New Beginning. Episode 1 was definitely a new beginning. The season, it was a new season. We were going up against Brentford, and you know what? Before this season even started, there were some story plots that we needed to discuss, and that was discussed in the show. One of the main story plots that was discussed, first things first, was Bukayo Saka. Bukayo Saka was playing for England, and he did miss the final penalty in the Euros final, which ended up being a devastating moment for him. But he did also receive a lot of abuse from fans, and this caused a lot of people to rally behind the young man Bukayo Saka. And as you can see here, Arsenal fans rallied behind Bukayo Saka and gave him letters, sent him gifts, sent him all these things, sent him all the support. And every single game that he played afterwards, he had a standing ovation from the crowd. Even the first game of the season versus Brentford, which we ended up losing, of course, but he still received a standing ovation from the whole crowd when he subbed on in the second half to help us try to change that game. But unfortunately, he couldn't change the game around. We ended up losing the first game of the season 2-0. And they spoke about that. They spoke about the fact that we lost the first game of the season. They spoke about the fact that we didn't have Lacazette. They spoke about the fact that we didn't have Aubameyang. They spoke about the fact that we haven't made any signings at that point in the time. And people were really starting to get upset. You had people leaving the stadium saying we're bottom of the league as a joke. It was a dark time, and we ended up going and losing a couple more games, losing subsequently to Chelsea. But before we lost to Chelsea, they took a flashback and spoke about some of the issues that the ownership have had prior to this. They got into the Kroenke out. They brought it back. They spoke about the Kroenke out protest. They spoke about how the club have and the fans have put pressure on the owners and rallied behind the Super League to gather as a group and get behind this movement, which was trying to get the owners out, trying to push the owners out. And Josh Kroenke, which was a heavy presence in this documentary, did mention that. So the 2 people that were under the most pressure early in the documentary were the 2 guys, which was Josh and obviously Mikel Arteta. You had people by the time we ended up playing By the time we ended up playing the game versus Manchester City, we've already made some signings at that point. And just let me note some stuff down. We've lost 2 games, and going into the third game, we finally made some signings. We made the signing of Ben White for £50 million, and you had people saying Ben White is not good enough. Ben White for £50 million. He even said verbatim, some young kid came up to him and told him £50 million, you're not worth that. You're shit or something like that. And it was mad. And he was just like caught off guard by that. We also bought Ramsdale. Ramsdale got a lot of abuse also. We ended up signing Odegaard for 34 million. We ended up signing Lokonga for 20 million, and we ended up signing Nuno Tavares for 7 million. At that point, this was August 18th. We've made those signings, right? What ended up happening? The club were moving in a situation. I'm just looking down at my notes, guys. The club were moving into a situation where they were going up against Manchester City. And what happened? We ended up losing 5-0, and Arteta out was trending all over social media. As you guys can remember, AFTV, every single Twitter page, everything was going crazy. Arteta out, Arteta out, Arteta out. That's what everyone was talking about. And it was just like, that was a moment where the club had so much pressure on their back. Everybody had so much pressure on their back. And Mikel Arteta made a choice. He had to make some big moves. And what he did was he rallied behind some of his new signings and got them in the team. He dropped Leno and brought Ramsdale straight in. And before we even speak about Ramsdale, you can see behind him Vinay, Edu, you can see Josh, Arteta, and they were all a big key in trying to get the recruitment done and everything else. They even had a moment in the show where they showed a board with the team and how everything looked in the back room with Edu, Vinay, and Josh speaking about potential signings and looking at the depth chart and saying to themselves, this is where we need to improve. This is where we need to move out players. And they're pointing at that right back spot, showing guys like Cedric, Bellerin, Ainsley, and Niles. And they're just like, you know what, we need to do something about this right back area. And then they ended up doing that. Eventually, we ended up bringing in Tomiyasu. But before we even brought in Tomiyasu, Thierry Henry made an appearance on the show. Thierry Henry made a big appearance. And when he made his appearance, he said something like, top 4 is a must. Top 4 is minimum guarantee for what Arsenal need, holding the standards high for Arsenal and making sure we cannot lose. We cannot do this. We have to get out of this realm of losing games. We need to figure out what we're going to do. KSI was on this was in the documentary also, and KSI was saying, Arsenal are not in a good place right now, but what am I going to do? Am I going to go switch to a club like Chelsea? I can't do that. I'm a fan of the club. I got to stick by the club. You had other fans coming out there saying Arteta's got to go. You had a couple of one brave man stood up against everybody and said, you know what, give him some time. That guy came on the screen and said, you know what, one little kid came on the screen and said, give him some time. Everyone else was kind of saying, you know what, it might be time to go for Arteta, especially after we lost to Manchester City. You had fans irate saying Arteta out. So going into that next game versus Norwich, it was crucial that we win that game. And it was a nail biter to say the least. You've seen him make substitutions. You've seen him bring back in some of his main guys. And Ramsdale, who was receiving a lot of hate from people on social media, even had to deactivate his social media account because of all the hate that he was receiving. And he really was taken back by it and showed how he was actually emotional by it. And he had his family at the game, and they showed that game in the way they did it was pretty beautiful. They showed it from the perspective of his family sitting there watching him play his first game for Arsenal at the Emirates, and his family are a big family unit that really support Ramsdale. So when they were doing that, he ended up getting a clean sheet. We ended up winning the game 1-0 from Aubameyang goal. It was a very dodgy goal. It was a very tight game. Watching it back, it just makes you remember how tight of a game that was. And don't forget, Norwich had chances. It could have been a lot more scarier, to be honest. But it ended up working out in our favor. And the episode 1 ended with the win versus Norwich. So that's how episode 1 ended. Going into episode 2 now. Going into episode 2. Episode 2 was called the North London Derby. Episode 2 was called North London Derby. But before we do that, let me just shout out to some of the people in the chat. We got a bunch of people in the chat. Yeah, definitely. Good morning. Big up. Big up to you. Arteta's the best manager. Love it. Just before we do that, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, if you've gotten this far, now we're going to get into the second episode. So going into the second episode, it started off with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, at the time who was the captain and leader of the team. And before we even got to Aubameyang's scene, we found ourselves in that Burnley game. Don't forget that Burnley away game was the second game where we ended up picking up 3 points. We picked up that 3 points from a free kick where Odegaard scored, and you could see the celebration and the cheer and the happiness in the team, in the management. Everybody was just so happy that we could finally get another 3 points on the board. And at that point, we were struggling. We only got one win out of our first 4, and to get that second win away from home, keep a clean sheet. Ramsdale having a good performance. Everyone seems to be remembering that game as a tight game. It was very tight. It was a nail biter. If it wasn't for that free kick and a penalty potentially being reversed and not being given, we wouldn't have gotten away with all 3 points, but we did, and it was crucial. And then going into that, they gave Aubameyang a little bit of his shine. Aubameyang spoke about the star that he gets on his haircut that he gets on his head. This is actually dedicated to his grandfather, who passed away one time when he was playing against Tottenham. So every time he plays against Tottenham, which this whole episode was leading up to the North London derby, he gets that star haircut. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang dedicating every single North London derby that he played to his grandfather, who passed away during a game against Tottenham, where he ended up scoring 2 goals, if you guys remember. Now, take it back for a second. He's getting that haircut. This is the North London derby. It's the build up to the North London derby, and they're showing us how they actually train and prepare for this North London derby, putting some pressure on some of the players, getting some of these guys, talking to them, telling them what they need to do, and also getting some camaraderie with the team. Getting the team photo was sorted out around that time also, just before the North London derby. You've seen some banter with Arteta getting onto Pepe and some of the other guys in the training room, showing them where they need to stand on the pitch, making sure they're within the half spaces. If they're not within the half spaces, they should be in the central areas, and telling people where to stand and quizzing them actually on what they should be doing throughout the game. And they're showing us these things in the documentary of Arteta quizzing the players answering questions. I think Kieran Tierney was one of the guys who actually answered the questions about where players should be standing and what's wrong with the 2 images. So he showed them 2 images of a pitch and then explained to them. But yeah, moving away from that, he also got into a little bit more. But before we get into the deeper things of the North London derby, they really did emphasize the academy players. They emphasized Emil Smith Rowe as a 15-year-old getting into this, from a 15-year-old player coming into Arsenal to the age that he's at now, showing how close, his close control, his skills, his ability, and just everything that he had to offer on the table. Emil Smith Rowe was truly a big part of this portion of the documentary, where they showed his whole backstory, spoke about him and how he's improved. One-on-one coaching sessions with Arteta's coaches, where they're telling him, you need to be stronger, Emil Smith Rowe. You can't let people push you off the ball. You need to get better at this. You need to make sure you are the man that we want you to be. And he was focused. He was ready. Now, moving on to Bukayo Saka before the North London derby. Before the North London derby, Bukayo Saka hasn't scored a goal in 19 games. Bukayo Saka has been this guy who has just missed a penalty in the Euros and hasn't scored a goal yet in the new season. We've lost 3 of those games, and he's played in every single one of them. So at this point, Bukayo Saka had a lot of pressure on him also. And as one of the best young players in the team, and one of the best young players in the league, and one of the best young players in Europe, actually, he had to start delivering. And this was before the North London derby, talking about him from the age of 8, coming into the Arsenal team, speaking about how his life has changed and how everything around him has changed in this time. It was an emotional moment, and getting ready for that North London derby, there was no one else that Mikel Arteta could go to besides the Arsenal cameraman, Stuart McFarlane. He went to Stuart McFarlane, and Stuart McFarlane before the game gave an emotional speech, getting these guys ready to go for this game. And he told them, this means everything to me. He was telling them what it meant to the fans, what it meant to him, what it should mean to them. And I don't think there was any better person at that moment in time to give a speech, to tell the people in that dressing room what that North London derby meant to those players and to the fans out there. And you know what they did? They went out there and they delivered. Emil Smith Rowe got on the goal sheet. Bukayo Saka got on the goal sheet. And Aubameyang got on the goal sheet. And at the end of the game, it all makes sense now. It all makes sense why he was pointing at Stuart McFarlane after the game. It all makes sense now why he was making such an emphasis, why he went to go hug him, and why it was so emotional for him and the cameraman. And also, this was another game where Aaron Ramsdale stood on his head. He did a good job as a goalkeeper. Our new signings all stepped up. Tomiyasu came in, looked solid. Ben White came in, looked solid. You had guys like Ramsdale come in, looked solid. Odegaard came in, ran the game. So now we finally got our signings. Our season has started. We've beaten Tottenham, a team that just when a couple weeks ago were top of the league when we were at the bottom. Now rows are closer. We're a little bit closer, and it was the morale boost that we needed to push on and try to get more from this season. And it was a great speech from him, and that speech pushed us on. And at the end of the day, Aubameyang, the captain, took that moment to praise Stuart McFarlane, gave him a signed shirt, and you know what? We moved on to the next part of the game. But yeah, before I move on to the third part, let me remind you guys, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget, I'll be doing reactions to All or Nothing, the whole entire series. This is the first 3 episodes, and then we'll continue to the next 3 next Thursday once they get out, right? People saying they wanted Bernardo Silva. Pray for Palace. Definitely pray for Palace at this moment in time, since we are doing something. We are going to be playing Palace on Friday, and this has got me more hyped than ever for Palace on Friday. The documentary was very interesting, 100%. The documentary was very interesting because it gives us the behind the scenes on everything going on at the club, and it also breaks it down. And one key thing that I didn't mention yet, Henri came on the stage again in the second episode, where he spoke about the North London Derby and how important it is to win the North London Derby, and how important it is for Arsenal to get their DNA back. I thought that was an important moment to mention and just to touch on that before we move on. And I don't think there's anything else really for that second episode. So I'm going to now shift over to the third episode. And I think the first 2 episodes were really captivating. The first episode specifically was that hook that got me. The first episode really got me. The second episode was an emotional climb because we won that game. It was a very important game for our season. I was actually in the crowd for that game, and I was very happy to see the other performance that we put in 3-1. It would have been nice to keep a clean sheet, but we didn't. And we move on now. We move on to Aston Villa and the next game and the third episode. The third episode was Stay in the Game. The third episode was called Stay in the Game. The reason why it was called Stay in the Game was because that was the premise of the whole episode. Everything that we had to do was just try to stay in the game and try to win and try to get whatever result we could. And once again, this was another Ramsdale game where Ramsdale was spoken about highly. Nuno Tavares, this was his debut. Nuno Tavares got his first game at this point. At this point, Nuno Tavares was pretty much an unknown. We didn't know much about him. Nuno Tavares got his first game versus Aston Villa at home. We won that game 3-1. Now, when that first goal went in, Ramsdale was pissed. Ramsdale was pissed. Now, I know this is the Liverpool picture, but pretty much the same image here at Aston Villa. He was so angry. He was looking at Lokonga, giving him side eyes. He was looking at other players, giving him side eyes. And after the game, you could visibly see how upset Aaron Ramsdale was after that 3-1 win. And everyone's coming to him saying, it's okay, we won. You should be happy. Edu's coming to him saying you should be happy. Arteta's saying to him you should be happy. Everyone's coming over him, consoling him. You would think we would have lost 4 or 5-0 the way that he reacted. And I love that reaction. It shows that he's fighting and he wants that clean sheet. It shows that he doesn't want to concede a single goal. It shows that he not only does he want to win, he wants perfection. And that's what I liked about that moment and why I wanted to highlight it, because I thought that was an important moment. It showed that Ramsdale has the character, in my opinion, of what we need as a top goalkeeper in the Premier League and in world football. You want to not concede a single goal. You want to have a clean sheet in every game. I know you're not going to get it every game, but you got to try to push for that. Also, in that game, against Aston Villa, once again, we've seen top performances from a lot of our players. We've seen some guys do the good thing. We've seen Nuno Tavares have his debut. And you know what? I was happy with that performance. Now we move on. Move on. We have to kick on. We have to kick on. We can't stay and hide. We can't stay and talk about it forever. Right? We got to move on. We got Leicester now. What happens against Leicester? Another man of the match performance from our new signing, our new number one, our new goalkeeper, Aaron Ramsdale. Guys, we have ourselves a new goalkeeper. We have ourselves a potential England number one in the future. We have ourselves Aaron Ramsdale performing out of this world, making some saves, some ridiculous saves. You guys remember that save he made against Leicester? That same save where a former Manchester United legend said that was the greatest save he's ever seen. Wow. At that moment in time, I'm still captivated. We win that game against Leicester, and now we've started to turn it. We've started to turn things around. Things are starting to turn around. Things are starting to look up. There were some draws in between there. Of course, we did draw to Brighton and some things like that, but they didn't show every single match. That is the reality. They left some of the matches out. But one thing they did touch on that I found extremely interesting, they spoke to Kieran Tierney, and they told us something about Kieran Tierney that I don't think even the most diehard fans knew. Kieran Tierney opened up about his mental health issues and his struggle with homesickness, being away from Scotland, being away from Glasgow, being at Celtic his whole life, being a youngster coming from that part of the world. He opened up, and this is the most emotional I've ever seen Kieran Tierney. He was speaking about his mental health issues. He was speaking about his friends that have lost their lives over issues with mental health and suicide, and how it's affected him and how it's made him homesick. He's somebody who likes to be home and to be around his family and friends. And he's like, being in London, being away from home, it kind of affected him. It was kind of difficult for him. And you know what? I respect his honesty, and it might have been very difficult for him to open up like that. And to get this kind of inside scoop and this kind of information from these players, it gives you that empathy and understanding that they're not just footballers that you're watching that are getting paid millions of pounds. They're actual human beings that have feelings and everything else, and they have their own struggles that we don't know about. So sometimes now when we're abusing these guys after a game, they might have their own issues that we don't know about. And that's just like some of these things that we're looking at Kieran Tierney. And he was coming back from an injury too. He was coming back and he's looking at Tavares and he's saying to himself, you know what? Tavares might keep me out of the team for a short time period. So I need to get back in there, get ready to fight. We knew by the end of the season that Kieran Tierney is much better than Tavares, and Tavares' purple patch then ended. But at that point, Tavares was still picked versus Liverpool away. And before Liverpool away, what did Arteta do? He wanted to teach these guys what the atmosphere was like going into that game against Liverpool. Because some of these guys in the team never played against Liverpool at a team like Arsenal where you have to win. I know Ramsdale played against Liverpool with Brentford and Sheffield United, but he never played expecting to win. Most of the time he went into the game expecting to try to get a draw or a loss. Arsenal, we went in there trying to win. Arteta was trying to get these guys used to the atmosphere, used to the way they do things. And you see this in North American sports all the time, where managers or coaches take weird approaches to try to get their team ready and clicked into the gear. Arteta went out of his way to get music pumped in as they're training and have Never Walk Alone playing in the background. It was a weird approach. It didn't end up working out. But if it did, it would have been a spotted genius. But it didn't work out. So, of course, we ended up losing that game quite convincingly bad. And Nuno Tavares had a stinker. Defensively, we were shocking. And Ramsdale, once again, was upset, telling people what to do. He conceded 4 goals that game. What can you do? Liverpool are just at a different level. And before that game, club captain didn't even get to start. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang was dropped versus Liverpool, and deservedly so, because his performances versus Newcastle and some of the other games that we were playing was piss poor. And this was a turning point for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. This was a point where we started to say to ourselves, did Aubameyang fall off? Aubameyang was missing sitter after sitter, and there was a reason why Arteta didn't start him that game. There was a reason why Arteta didn't look at him. And versus Everton, he was dropped. Versus Everton, he was dropped. Everton away. Everton, a team that was poor for that run. This was at the time where they couldn't buy a win. Arsenal goes to Everton. We get a 1-0 lead. Odegaard goal. After we just lost to Manchester United 3-2. We need to bounce back. And you know what? What we've been able to do majority of these times, we're bounce back. We would usually bounce back. But what happened was we lost 2 in a row. The Demarai Gray winner at the end. And Ben White, the new signing, got a lot of stick from the fans. It was a poor way to end the third chapter to this series, the third video. But the third video did end on a low. It ended with the loss to Everton. And the loss to Everton was a moment where Mikel Arteta grilled the team. He told them you guys were playing like cowards. He told them you guys were not following the instructions. He stopped himself from going further because he felt like he said this in the doc. If I say more, I might regret it. So I'm not going to say nothing. And he walked away because you could tell that the players did not follow their instructions. You could tell that the players were just passing it backwards, and not trying to actually go out there and win. It was a little bit of fear in the players' hearts almost. You could see in that third video when we were playing Everton, that the way that we're playing, how bad it was. I'm hopeful that they've gotten that out of the system now that they have more experience and more experience around them. But at this moment in time, that was the end. That was the end of the third video, the introduction to the next chapter, where they touched on Arteta getting COVID, where they touched on a Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang potentially leaving the club, and lining us up for the next episode. But yeah, that was my review. Shout out to everybody watching right now. This is not a regular video, of course. I'm not going to be interacting too much with the chat, but I really do appreciate you guys checking us out, watching. And if you're watching on the playback and you've gotten this far, do me a favor. Let me know what you thought about the documentary so far. Let me know what you thought about the documentary. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. You already know what it is. It's the Kitty G on EGTV. And I wore that yellow kit in honor of last season. I know last season did not end well. I know the documentary people are going to try to laugh. But what are you going to say? Of course, I did tell you spoiler warnings at the beginning because I was going to get in details. Hopefully you enjoyed the details. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you thought this video was informative because there were some things that we learned. And there were some things that we definitely are going to look at. But yeah, you guys have yourselves a wonderful day. It's Kitty G. I'll be back later today. And love to everybody. Have yourselves a beautiful, beautiful Thursday morning. Peace.